Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Quarantales. With our next episode, we've got Bill Carroll from Nuts and Bolts. He's been there since the beginning of time, one of the OG writers, podcasters. So let's bring Bill in from Chicago. How are you?
It's warm here. It's kind of a warm, muggy, steamy summer day. And in order not to mess up the audio, I've turned off all the fans and everything, so I'm going to be a little moist. But yes, it's been a very interesting time. In addition to obviously what's happening nationwide, my city was also fairly strongly affected by a lot of protests and even a few riots here and there.
So before the movements had begun, how was Chicago handling the entire COVID situation? And how did your lifestyle change from your day-to-day to being I don't know if they had a full sheltered in place named, but if you had resorted to that, how was that?
Sure. So since March, I've been working from home, and which I'm sure a lot of people have been as well. I have reduced my contact with the outside world as little as humanly possible, which has made certain things challenging or difficult. But thank God for Instacart and Amazon and eBay and everything else. I've definitely probably have more boxes in like my sort of nothing room, everything room, whatever you call it, the everything's rated up room, than I probably should. So at some point I need to break those suckers down. But it has been a challenge, as it has been for everyone. A lot of my coworkers are older, so we've been very, very cautious. It has been, you just have to make up things for yourself to do, obviously. Luckily, I do a bunch of podcasts and a bunch of writing, so that keeps me busy. And my daughter did summer school from home also, which, good things and bad things. She's gets to lay around in pajamas all day long, which is really one of her favorite things to do anyway. But definitely she's, missing contact with her friends, like anybody. We're all missing contact with our friends and family that we normally, would have the ability to be in contact with them. And it's just trying to figure out things to make each day different from the last. You don't feel like you're living, in Groundhog's Day.
So how did your day-to-day change once they announced that they would like everybody to stay home? Like what difference did you have to make in your home?
Not going places. I mean, I've probably left my home literally a handful of times, like maybe 5 times since March. So I'm finally, tomorrow I'm getting a haircut, my first haircut, and you can't, luckily the lighting isn't that great, you'd be horrified, but I haven't had an actual professional haircut in a very long time. Tomorrow's going to be my first haircut in 4+ months, probably, or close to it. I'm exaggerating slightly. It's been a challenge. What else has been a challenge? You definitely notice things that you would not have noticed about your home before, because I didn't spend that much time at home before. So now it's like, this floor is uneven. You start making up things for you to do to keep yourself busy. And I've done a lot of putting together reading lists for people. So if you're interested in reading lists about racism or anti-racism, I've put together several for friends. I've put together, a list of what I think are the best 100 hip hop albums of all time and sent them to friends. Just things that just you would have done maybe someday, you're now doing now. There's 2 people I'm writing plays about now, including Eppa Manley, who was still to this day the only woman of color in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And she was the owner of the Newark Eagles. And her headstone says these words: "She loved baseball." That's what it says on her gravestone. That's it. But it was very much true. And so I've been researching her life, and I have a lot to keep me busy. So it's not like I'm not busy, but you definitely do miss going places and doing things.
Yeah, I agree. Well, all 3 of those things sound like something I definitely want to share. So when we're finished recording, I'll post, all those in the description so people can check them out, because I'm going to check them out, especially the hip hop list, because I need to know what your top 100 is. So when everything first started, how was your mental health doing? And now we're passing 100 days of not going anywhere except the store and back, and not being able to, go to your friend's house or something like that. So how did you handle everything?
My mental health has always been, when you're a former combat veteran, certain things are a challenge for you anyway. And then, Fourth of July. I mean, I get it, but geez, that's rough on vets, man. Please, people, just remember when you're celebrating, it can be rough on veterans. It can be a tough day. So July 4th was rough, but for the most part, I mean, like I said, luckily I'd gone mostly crazy already, so it wasn't too much of a difference. But yes, you do definitely, like I said, you just keep coming up with things to keep yourself busy. I remember a play I wrote many years ago called Vital Signs, which is about a man who's in solitary confinement for almost 11 years. And it's based on an actual person named Daruba Benwahad, and he was a member of the Panther 21, the Black Panther 21, and he'd been in jail, and it turned out wrongly convicted, as it turned out, for many years. And of that time he spent in prison, 11 years of his time in prison was spent in solitary confinement. So I had talked to this man, interviewed this man, Richard D. Moore, a.k.a. Daruba Benwahad, about how you not go completely crazy when you are literally locked up by yourself for 11 years. He told me some of the things he did, which I later adapted into a play I wrote. So luckily, having spent time with someone who told you about how to keep your mind together when everything's trying to tear it apart, that helped. But just like I said, you realize what's really important. I'm at a point in my life where when I go out, I might go for a walk or visit family or friends or to the store or whatever. And so I've given that stuff up. I haven't been able to do all that stuff I'd normally like to do, but it sure beats the alternative. I mean, you see what's happening in places where people have not been doing what they're supposed to do in terms of masking up and social distance, and it's ravaging some states. I mean, look what's happening in Arizona and Florida and some other places. So it's not great here, but it could be worse. It could be a lot worse. And for the most part, people mask up. I've seen some people who haven't. And for the most part, people have been doing a good job of social distancing. And I'll give props to our mayor. She had been mayor for a very short amount of time when this happened. Lori Lightfoot, one of the first lesbian mayor in the history of our city, and a Black woman. And she's done a great job. And she stood up to people. A lot of the business owners had sort of risen up against her and sort of demanded the reopening, and she said no. So props to her for doing what is going to probably end up being much better in the long term for the people of the city.
Sure. So what is the status of Chicago right now? Are you closer to downtown, or are you in a suburb?
I am not in a suburb. I am the south side of Chicago, in a neighborhood known as the Grand Crossing neighborhood, which means probably nothing to you, but I am, south central, I guess you would say, part of the city.
So is it still a shelter in place in Chicago?
Yes. Okay. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yes. There has been a sort of limited reopening of certain things, but most of the businesses, a lot of the businesses are open, but open with restrictions like social distancing and people being required to wear a mask. This is a very vital time. I mean, what's happening now is going to determine if things get even worse over the next, month or two, or if things start getting better. And obviously some states have, like I said, already gotten to the point where they've sort of missed that tipping point, and already they're going to end up with a really bad next couple of months as opposed to things getting better. Yeah. So I'm glad both the governor and our mayor
had to shut down.
Well, luckily, right. Well, our governor and our mayor, I will say that they did a good job. Say what you want. They both took pretty quick and pretty decisive action to shut almost everything down for a long time, and it's helped.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. So how have you been coping without sports? Because that's definitely our outlet. And I know for me, I was upset because we were supposed to go to March Madness, and Joe and I were going to cover so many things, and then it was canceled. So it's been hard to get over, truly.
I rewatched a lot of football games that I'd seen already, and sometimes it helped me. Like I spot a player that I hadn't spotted before, things like that. So I've already started putting together my watch list. I have my 100 small school player watch list already done, and I'm working on my big school, FBS level watch list. And of course, unfortunately, a couple of D2 conferences have already announced there'll be no fall sports. The most recent one being the PSAC, which includes Mercyhurst and Indiana, University of Pennsylvania, and a lot of really, really good. I mean, I think the PSAC is one of the best D2 conferences in sports. Extremely competitive, and they have some just brutal rivalries. There's a lot of what I call fun-hate between those schools, and it's sort of sad to see that go. And, Rontez Miles, who was a Pittsburgh Steeler for several years, and several of the guys came out of that conference. It's a conference that puts out good football players. So it was very sad to hear about that. But once again, both for budgetary reasons and for safety reasons, a lot of the smaller conferences, smaller, lower levels of sports are going to be forced to make some very tough decisions. And it's funny, one of the things that we'll be covering later tonight is the Black College Hall of Fame event that's starting in a couple of hours. And a lot of these schools are facing a very tough decision because they don't have the large endowments that large predominantly white schools have. So they don't have the cushion for when things like this happen. So when they lose the ability to have gate receipts from games and things like that, it may force them to cut sports. So it's going to be really tough.
Yeah, I saw when Pac-12 announced they were only going to play Pac-12 schools. It was following after of the other announcements, so we can expect that to happen for all colleges. So for the NBA return, how are you feeling about the bubble and the things that you're reading about?
Well, the NBA is lucky-ish in that you can do something like that with the NBA. It's a sport where they're dealing with a smaller number of teams and the rosters are smaller, right? I mean, in a normal football camp, you might have 90 to 105 guys, right? I mean, that's like, almost 10 teams in the NBA, so it's very different. The demands of running a football program or a football camp or a series of practices, because there's this sheer number of people. And of course, football is a collision sport. So basketball is a contact sport, but it's a safer sport than something like football or MMA or things like that, where you're going to be exchanging bodily fluids with someone pretty much on a regular basis. If you've ever wrestled or boxed or played football, you've been bled on, spit on, people's saliva, every bodily function pretty much has been exchanged. So it's a little different. Baseball and basketball have at least an opportunity simply because you don't have quite that amount of physical contact exchange. But on the other hand, it is tough. Normally, basketball players have some of the toughest travel. Now, they're going to get rid of that. That's the whole point of the bubble, is all that exposure that you have through travel. I mean, an airport is basically a great place to get sick, if you know what I mean. Like, if you know what I'm talking, because of all the people that normally be passing through and everything like that. So if you can eliminate the travel portion, that's going to be helpful. But you can't completely eliminate risk. And we've seen how many players have already been exposed. So they need to be very stringent when it comes to testing. They need to, obviously, it looks like we're finally getting close to having an available vaccine. That's something that I think, they'll be a big part of it as well. But basketball at least has a chance, but they need to be very smart about how to use that chance.
When they announced that they were returning, how did you feel about that? Were you on board with it? Did you, as a sports fan, I was excited, but also as a human being, I was a little worried for the exposure portion, because the states that some players were in were opened up already, and so that led to them being exposed. So how were you feeling about that?
Well, I'm a little older than you are, so I'm probably a little more if you were like 50-50, I'm more like 70-30. As much as I love seeing people compete at the highest level of sports, I don't think it's worth one person's life. And
Sure.
it could conceivably, once again, not just the players. You have to remember that there's people who clean up after every game. The players, aren't there, cleaning up. They're up there with squeegees after the game. You know what I mean? Like there's people who we don't think about who are going to be a part of this process, who are transporting players, who are, like I said, there's somebody washing towels. There's somebody, and not all of those people are young athletes in the peak of physical perfection. Right. I mean, that's my main concern. It isn't so much the players, though I obviously know that the players are at risk, but it's that 58-year-old person with diabetes who cleans up afterwards. Like that's the thing that I'm thinking about. I think this person whose name you don't even know, who is doing laundry, who is picking up mouthpieces and all the other stuff that we don't think about when we think about a sporting event. We just think about the players and the coaches. We don't think about the nameless other people that have to come in contact with people's dirty clothes and equipment and everything like that. Those are the people I'm really worried about.
Yeah, no, I agree. So how, to kind of wrap things up, how do you think the NFL is going to process their return based off of what they're seeing from the NBA so far?
Well, assuming they finally decide to go away from straight denial, which it seemed to be where they originally were, everything's gonna be fine. Nothing to see here. What are you talking about? Right? That was basically their whole thing for a long, long time. Like, what are you talking about? We're gonna play all the games, the whole season's gonna be fine. Yeah. Now they're admitting that some things will probably be different. They still haven't gone very far. Like, you can see how slow off the mark they've been to admit how serious everything is. I assume that there will be in the next 30, 60, maybe at the most 90 days, but probably less than that because it's July already. So yeah. I'm going to say the next 30 to 60 days, they're going to have to announce that some of the things they said were going to be fine are not going to be fine. I think they have to move the season back at least a few weeks. I think obviously we're going to lose the preseason. I think that camp is going to be weird, short, and really different, and probably with almost no contact. This may be the first no contact in terms of tackling and things like that. Fall camp or OT. I mean, I don't know. They're going to do something because you can't just show up and play football, but because that would be bad. But whatever they end up doing. Right? But whatever it is they end up doing, it's going to have to be radically different from anything else we've ever seen in the past. So, I mean, my friend and former draft Twitter colleague, Charles McDonald, who is a great follow if you don't follow him on Twitter, wrote an article with some health experts about how they could do this. Now, I don't know if the NFL is paying any attention to Charles or anything else, but hopefully they will. There's some really good recommendations in there about how you could safely-ish bring back football. There's a problem with football because football isn't safe even when there's no, pandemics. People get, ghastly, horrible injuries. I mean, think about what we watched what happens to Joe Theismann or Alex Smith or some other really, heart-rending injuries. And now think about that with a pandemic, right? I mean, think about how complicated an Alex Smith type situation would have been where he has, not to be too graphic, but all this bone sticking out of his leg, and there's a global pandemic going on, right? Yeah. So imagine if that had happened with all that. So football's tough. I love football's like short of my own family members. There's nothing else I love more than football practically. But I'm worried. I'm not going to lie. I'm very worried because it's so hard to do football, period. Like, I don't think people really understand how hard it is to put together a football season when nothing's going on. And now you add to it that, travel. All these things we're going to have to figure out, or they're going to have to figure out. I'm not going to be paid to do this, but they're going to have to figure out. And it's like I said, if you haven't read Charles McDonald's article, do so. There's some good stuff in there.
Yeah, I will definitely check that out because I want to see what kind of options he suggested to the NFL.
There's some interesting stuff in there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's kind of all I had for the interview. I know you got a ton going on today, your book back to back.
Yes.
So I don't want to take up
Yes.
any more of your time, but I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your insight. And I'm going to add all of the different things that you've listed throughout this interview in the description box. And we will all give you a follow. Here's your Twitter.
There you go. That's it. That's the main account.
The main Twitter, and you can also find everything on Nuts and Bolts Sports. He's a huge writer. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks, Bill. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you. The
Good
pleasure's
luck.
mine. Take care, Ashmere, and I hope California also sort of finds its way out of this as well.
Oh God, I know.